The dawn sky above Shale Haven burned orange and red, not from sunrise, but from the fires that had been burning for 7 days straight. Azel pressed his 4 hands against the crystal window of the control tower and watched another piece of his world die. The Zythax ships hung in the sky like black clouds. Every few hours, they would fire their weapons at something new. Yesterday, it was the thermal power plant. The day before, they destroyed the main filtration station. Today, they were taking their time with the last orbital defense platform. Azel was the colony administrator. That meant he was supposed to keep everyone safe. But how could he protect 20,000 Verdun from ships that could destroy buildings with a single shot? His people were prospectors and agrarian specialists, not soldiers. They had built Shale Haven to be a peaceful place among the obsidian canyons and azure glass trees of Ethel 9C. Administrator, called Cathar from across the control room. The chief engineer's voice was rough with exhaustion. They had all been awake for days. The pressure grid is failing. We have maybe 6 hours before the underground shelters lose life support. Azel nodded slowly. 6 hours. The Zythax had been playing with them for a week, but it looked like the game was almost over. He activated his communication device and sent out another message on all emergency channels. This is Shale Haven Colony requesting immediate assistance. We are under attack by Zythax raiders. 20,000 civilians need evacuation. Please, someone help us. He had sent the same message hundreds of times. The answer was always silence. The outer systems were too far from the main trade routes. The big governments did not care about small mining colonies. Corporate security would not risk their expensive ships for people who could not pay. Through the crystal walls, Azel could see Verdun families hurrying toward the underground tunnels. Parents carried their young in soft pouches while the elderly moved slowly on walking sticks. His people were scared, but they stayed calm. That was the Verdun way. Even when facing death, they kept their dignity. A new explosion lit up the sky. The last orbital defense platform broke apart in a shower of metal and fire. Pieces of it fell like burning rain across the azure spires of the city. Azel closed his eyes. Now there was nothing between the Zythax and his people. In the sublight communication center, Trade Captain Jorah was still trying to reach someone, anyone who might help. He had contacts throughout the sector. Traders, freight pilots, even some smugglers owed him favors. But when he called them now, they all said the same thing. Fighting the Zythax was suicide. Shale Haven was already lost. Try the emergency beacon again, Azel told him. Administrator, we are already at maximum range, and if we use more power, we might overload the system. Do it anyway. Deep in the underground tunnels, Elder Keeper Lina led the colonists in their traditional songs. Her voice was old and wise, and it helped calm the frightened children. She sang about the obsidian canyons where their ancestors had lived, and about the soft light that would guide them to peace. But young Zelira was not ready for peace. She was barely past her first molting, still new to adult life. While the others prepared to die with dignity, she crawled through the maintenance tunnels toward the power station. If she could reroute energy from life support to the communications array, maybe their beacon could reach further into space. It was dangerous work. Taking power from life support meant people in the tunnels would have less air to breathe. But if no help came, they would all die anyway. At least this way, someone might hear their final message. Above ground, the Zythax were getting bored with their slow game. War Captain Draskin stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked down at the Crystal City. The Verdun had stopped fighting back. Their defense platforms were gone, and their military was nothing more than a few patrol boats with mining lasers. Begin the final assault, he ordered his officers. Land the troop carriers. I want half the population taken alive for the slave markets. Kill the rest. The Zythax were cold-blooded mercenaries who had turned piracy into an art form. Transport ships began dropping from the main fleet toward the planet's surface. Each one carried 50 Zythax warriors armed with plasma rifles and shock weapons. They would sweep through the city like a plague, taking what they wanted and burning the rest. In the control tower, Azel watched the enemy ships descend. He activated the colony's final message beacon, broadcasting on all frequencies to tell the galaxy what was about to happen. This is Administrator Azel of Shale Haven Colony. The Zythax fleet is beginning their final attack. We have no defenses left. 20,000 innocent Verdun are about to be killed or enslaved. We tried to live in peace. We hurt no one. We only wanted to build a better life among the stars. His voice was calm, but tears ran down his face. If anyone receives this message, please remember us. Remember that we existed. Remember that we tried to be good. Young Zelira finished her work in the power station. Warning lights flashed red as life support systems began shutting down throughout the colony, but the communication array now had 3 times its normal power. Their beacon was screaming into space farther than it had ever reached before. The first Zythak's boots touched verdant soil just as Zelira collapsed from lack of oxygen. As she closed her eyes, she whispered a prayer to whatever powers might be listening. "Please," she said, "someone help us." The obsidian canyons deep beneath Shale Haven had never been so crowded. 20,000 Verdant pressed together in the ancient tunnels their ancestors had carved from living rock. The air was getting thin. Elder Keeper Lina moved slowly through the crowds, her old hands touching shoulders and whispering comfort. She was over 300 years old. Above their heads, they could hear explosions and the sound of energy weapons. The Zythaks were destroying everything they could not steal. The azure spires that had taken decades to grow were being shattered in minutes. In the communications center, Trade Captain Jorah tried one more frequency. This one reached a mining station 3 systems away. "Station Commander, this is an emergency. We have 20,000 civilians about to be slaughtered. Can you send ships?" A tired voice responded. "Captain Jorah, we heard your beacon. We are sorry, but we only have 2 small patrol boats. The Zythaks have a full battle fleet. There is nothing we can do. We will remember your colony in our prayers." Jorah turned off the communication system and put his head in his hands. He had failed his people. Down in the tunnels, Administrator Azel called Chief Engineer Cathar. "The tunnel walls are starting to crack. They are using sonic weapons to break through the rock." Soon the Zythaks would break into their hiding place. The slaughter would begin. But far away in the darkness between the stars, something had heard their desperate beacon. Something that was already moving toward them at impossible speed. 3 light years away from Shale Haven, the human deep patrol cruiser UES Valiant drifted silently through the darkness between the stars. Captain Simon Bennett was in his quarters reading reports when the emergency beacon hit their communications array like a punch to the gut. "Captain, to the bridge," came the voice of First Officer Julia Vance over the ship's communication system. "We have a priority distress call. You need to hear this." Simon was on his feet and moving before she finished speaking. "What do we have, Julia?" he asked as he stepped onto the bridge. "Distress beacon from the Ethel system," Vance replied. "A Verdant colony called Shale Haven. They say they are under attack by Zythak's raiders." She played the recording. The fear was universal. "How far are we from their position?" Navigator Alex Reed looked up from his station. 3.2 light years, Captain. At normal cruise speed, it would take us 4 days to get there." 4 days, Simon repeated. "Those people will be dead in 4 days." "Captain," said Chief Engineer Amy Watson from her station, "we could use the experimental jump drive, the new one we've been testing. It could get us there in 18 hours. "Amy, you said yourself that drive isn't ready for combat operations," Vance frowned. "We could damage the ship. We could even get stuck between dimensions." "I know the risks," Watson replied, "but those people don't have 4 days." Alex ran the numbers quickly. 60% chance of arriving with full systems operational, 30% chance of arriving with some damage, 10% chance of, well, not arriving at all. "What about the Zythak's fleet? What are we looking at?" Simon asked. Combat specialist Mark Clark spoke up from his weapons station. "1 heavy cruiser, 3 destroyers, and maybe a dozen smaller ships. They're pirates, not real military." "Can we handle them?" Clark smiled grimly. "Captain, the Valiant was built to fight real warships. The Zythaks have never faced anything like human military technology. If we can get there, we can take them." Communications Officer Ben Taylor raised his hand. "Captain, the distress beacon is getting weaker. I think their power systems are failing." "All right, people," Simon said, his voice carrying to every corner of the bridge. "Amy, prepare the experimental jump drive for emergency operation. Alex, plot a course with multiple short jumps to reduce the stress on our systems. Mark, charge all weapons. Julia, you've got the bridge. We're going." First Officer Vance stepped forward. "Captain, regulations require me to point out that the outer systems are not our patrol area. We have no official orders to intervene." Simon smiled. "Julia, sometimes doing the right thing is more important than following regulations. Those people are calling for help, and we're the only ones who can give it to them. This is why humans build ships like the Valiant, not to conquer worlds or steal resources, but to protect people who cannot protect themselves." The stars outside began to shift and blur as the Valiant prepared to leap across impossible distances. In 18 hours, the Zythaks would learn what happened when humans heard someone crying in the darkness. The UES Valiant dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Ethel system like a ghost. First Officer Vance stared at the tactical display. Fires burned on the planet's surface where the Crystal City had once stood. "How many ships?" Simon asked. Mark Clark scanned the enemy fleet. One heavy cruiser, 4 destroyers, and 15 smaller vessels. They're holding position while their ground forces finish the job. On the communications array, Ben Taylor confirmed the power systems were failing. Maybe 2 hours of life support left. Here's the plan, Simon said. We take out their command ship first, mark precision strikes on their engines and weapons, disable as many as possible. He opened a communication channel to the Zythax fleet. Zythax vessels, this is Captain Simon Bennett of the United Earth ship Valiant. You have exactly 60 seconds to withdraw from this system or face the consequences. On the bloody Talon, Draskin nearly fell out of his command chair. Human, he sneered. You are one ship against an entire fleet. Withdraw now, and we might let you live long enough to become a slave. 50 seconds, Draskin. I suggest you use them wisely. When the countdown hit 0, the Valiant's main rail gun fired. A tungsten slug crossed the distance to the bloody Talon's engine section in less than a second, hitting with the force of a small nuclear weapon. The enemy flagship shuddered and went dead in space. The Valiant fired again, faster than the Korak systems could lock onto. Mark Clark worked his weapons console like a master pianist, turning enemy armor into molten metal. The technological gap was horrifying to witness. Down on the planet's surface, Marine Lieutenant David Stone's drop pods slammed into the ground. His team moved through the crystal ruins, using stun grenades and sonic disruptors to knock the Zythax warriors unconscious without permanent harm. In less than 10 minutes, the Zythax ground forces were neutralized. In space, the battle was over in exactly 17 minutes. Half the Zythax fleet was disabled. The other half was fleeing at maximum speed. The first thing the Verdun saw when they emerged from their underground shelters was not what they expected. Instead of Zythax soldiers, they found humans in blue uniforms carrying medical supplies and engineering equipment. Dr. Erin Hayes knelt beside an elderly Verdun, placing an oxygen mask over his face. Tech specialist Chris Johnson worked on the translation device. Administrator Azel stood at the tunnel entrance, hardly believing what he was seeing. The humans are repairing our power grid, Chief Engineer Cathar said, amazement in his voice. We will have full power restored within hours. Captain Simon Bennett walked through the Crystal City. Amy Watson approached him, her hands dirty from working on the communication array. Captain, I've got their distress beacon converted to a standard communication system, but they need more permanent defenses. The Zythax will tell other raider groups. Elder Keeper Liner approached them slowly, her eyes bright with intelligence. Chris Johnson held the translator. Captain Bennett, she said. I am Liner, Keeper of the Old Ways. I must ask you something that puzzles me greatly. Why did you come? We are strangers to you. We have no wealth to offer, no treaties, and your government, the Earth hegemony, gave us silence. Simon looked at the ancient Verdun, then at the smoking ruins of the city, and finally at the grateful faces of the survivors. Elder, he replied, his voice calm, the rest of the galaxy operates on trade and territory. They only respond to the threat of war or the promise of profit. He paused, placing his hand lightly on his ship's insignia, a sword sheathed in a flower. We came because you asked for help. The moment a plea for innocent life reaches human ears, it creates a debt, not of commerce, but of conscience, and that debt must be paid. He looked at Amy Watson. We can't stay forever, but we can leave them something better than silence. Amy, install the Watchman sensor net. It's military grade. If a hostile ship jumps into this system, it'll trip every alarm and notify every major power within 10 light years. It won't fight their battles for them, but no pirate fleet will ever again be able to operate here in secret. Watson nodded, a resolute smile on her face. Consider it done, Captain. Simon turned back to the elder. Shale Haven is safe today, Liner. From now on, your defense is not just your own. It is an investment, one made by strangers who believe in a simple truth, that if one light goes out, the galaxy grows darker for everyone. The Elder Keeper bowed her head in the Verdun gesture of deepest respect. For every darkness that consumes the innocent, there is a distant light that sees the shadow and answers the call.